Hello, my name is Rivas Mayoki, an author. I recently said, "Oh, look, my knitting. I look like a real grandma." Recently, yesterday, I made a video about cleaning and how I'm throwing out my notebooks, and I did just that. My thumb got injured. How many pages I had to tore up to throw it out, and as I tore pages, of course, my eyes lingered. And in 2018, there's so many times like I'll move to London, I'll go to London, I'll live in London, and I'm like, oh, it's not just a casual desire. I forgot that it was so intense. I don't know, the idea of living in London was back in 2014, and it came from my sister like randomly. Will you live in London one day? And I was like, maybe, who knows? But it seems like something I will have to make for myself. They say when you die that you regret things that you didn't do, not those that you tried. So, I don't know, on my bucket list to live, to skip over the pond and live in London. Maybe not just London, somewhere outskirts of London. I don't know. London seems so scary, to be honest. Zagreb is a village compared to London, and I'm living on outskirts of Zagreb my whole life. I lived in near the center for one period of time, but most of the time on the periphery. So I don't know. It looks so urban and big. I don't know how will I manage that, but we'll see. How brave will I be? I don't know. I like to be brave much more than I like to be cowardly. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I tore up all my pages and now I'm left with snippets of my starts of my stories that I have to transcribe into computer or to decide to discard them completely. That's the hardest part, to discard the story completely. I much prefer when I find a story I didn't develop that somebody else already made it, so it doesn't make it so, I don't know, like I'm betraying my characters. When I was young and we did Pirandello in high school, I think, we read Six Faces is Looking for an Author. I don't know how you translate that. That was translated in Croatian like that. And we read it, watched the in theater the show, and live, and it was a very, really very fascinating story for me, an impactful one, because it was about characters Pirandello didn't want to write story about, but they pestered him, and he wrote this play in which he evades them and they are chasing him and telling their story no matter what he wants. And it was always such an interesting story for me that stuck with me, because when you write, there are stories you're not really thrilled to write, and characters you're not really a fan of, and when their story unravels, it's really very obvious why he was hesitant in writing it and why it wasn't on the top of his list of writing stories. But it shows the process of writing stories so well. There's a character that pesters you in your mind, and you either submit or it leaves you alone. Like when I was younger, I have so many beginnings. I have much more beginnings than I do have ends. And when I was younger, there was a story that I dreamed of. I often dream of my stories. So I dreamt of, it was a story about chauffeur. He was a driver and a young aspiring actress who just arrived to Hollywood, and it was, I don't know, 50s somewhere. And it was a fun story about the two of them talking, walking, and she had roommates, and it's supposed to be like this small love story, nothing too grand. And then I was always regretful I just left that story after just few pages. And then in, I think, 2017, anyway, somewhere along the line, I went through television and stopped on the one scene of a movie, and I just stopped like, this scene looks familiar. he looks familiar. She looks like it just reminded me in that first shot of that story of that chauffeur and his young aspiring actors, and it turned out that it was just that story but already adapted and made differently. They added Howard Hughes in it, like he's old, and their love story is a backdrop for his old age. And I was like, ah, that story got made. Nice. I can throw it away. Because it was made, it's especially satisfying, but because it was made much, much better than I would made it. I would never be courageous enough to put Howard Hughes in it and make it like this big thing that has bigger aspects to it. It would be just a silly little story about aspiring actors in the times of Marilyn Monroe walking around. I don't know, maybe make my own version on it in time if I have time and those characters return to me. But that story in that movie followed the same beats I had for that story in my drawer. So I really do believe we all are working on the same spectrum of dreams and stories. And that is for me a better explanation why more than one movie about some topic gets out at the same time. Just more people worked on it and finished it, and what can you do than release it and hope that your version is better than the other one? It was like when Tangled came to cinema. And I was so annoyed when Tangled came to cinema because I was working on a spin on a Rapunzel for a few years when it came out, and it was about a thief who comes to claim Rapunzel and their struggles with their parents. And when I watched it, it was that's that story. He's even thief who dies in the end to sacrifice. Yes, that's it. That's the story I was writing. But I wasn't dissatisfied. Again, it was better than I would have done it because it's Disney and it was beautifully made. I didn't have any resentment towards it. Although later, when I revisited Rapunzel and Googled it a bit, I did find it a bit disturbing that their age difference was the same as me and my ex-husband, and that they did have the same age me and my ex-husband had when we met. Those kind of coincidences just make life like, what is life? You can never be sure what is life, but my experience taught me that life is much more complicated and interconnected than we are prone to believe. And I know people say, coincidences. I'm sorry. So many coincidences like that happen to me. I just have to see a pattern in them. It seems like silly not to see a pattern in them. Anyway, that's two of my stories I found already made in mainstream media. Some other I did find too, but I was quite upset because they weren't made as good as I wish them to be made. So maybe I will do them anyway, despite them already being out there. Because stories are such, you can do lots of variants of them, and it's okay. Let's do many stories for many different people to enjoy them, to find themselves in them, and to, I don't know, learn something. Is my shirt full of paper crumbs because I was tearing paper? Anyway, my thumb doesn't hurt anymore. I could tear some more. There's few notebooks left to be shredded to pieces to become something new. Anyway, that was it for this rant. I didn't expect to speak about this topic. It was interesting, at least for me. I hope it was good for you too. See you around. Bye.